Hello everyone, and welcome to Indonesia Unedited, a serious conversations about Indonesia, the country, the language, and culture. My name is Indra. I'm a lecturer in Indonesian Studies at the University of New England, Australia.
And I'm Jane. I'm also a lecturer in Indonesian Studies here at UNE.
In the last episode, we had Indonesian ambassador to Australia, Dr. Siswo Pramono. I interviewed him and we talked about the dynamics of Indonesia-Australia relationship. And in that context, we talked about state-to-state relationship. And in this episode, we're trying to talk something a bit deeper, that is people-to-people relationship. And we're going to focus on cross-cultural relationship, as you probably found when you went to Indonesia, to Bali, Jogja, or probably here somewhere in Australia. You will find couples that come from different cultural background. We have Jane here who will share her thoughts about cross-cultural relationships. Jane, what's your perspective on cross-cultural relationship?
So, cross-cultural relationships between Indonesians and Australians, yeah?
Could be that, could be, elsewhere.
Elsewhere. Well, focusing on Indonesians and Australians, we probably tend to see the majority of these are made up of Indonesian women with a white Australian man. Okay,
That's true.
In that situation in the Australia-Indonesia space, there are some other, smaller representations of Indonesian men and Australian women, or Indonesian men and Australian men, and then we could go further and further into more detail. But as somebody who has been in one of those minority relationships as an Australian woman dating an Indonesian man, it was, let's just say, it was a massive learning experience for me.
So you had this experience
Yes.
before.
Yeah, so I think it really depends on, it's what you make of it in terms of the cross-cultural relationship. So you could just treat it as any other relationship. But I think for me, I like to, I take this seriously. I take my life learning seriously. And so through cross-cultural dating relationships, you can learn a whole lot more about the world and enhance your global perspective and just, get to know somebody from another part of the world that you probably wouldn't have expected to know growing up.
Before we talk about the challenges, can you tell a little bit like the first time that you had that experience and what made it different to, general relationships? Like what's common here in Australia? Why is it so exciting? Some people it's beautiful because you find, like what you said, you found a different world and you learn a lot about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. So I think the initial stages of a cross-cultural relationship, if you're very open-minded and open to learning new things, it can be a thing of beauty, because everything is basically new. Not only are you going through the standard relationship things of getting to know somebody new, but you're learning about that person plus this whole world that they belong to. And especially as somebody who's very enthusiastic about learning about this whole new world, their cultural context, I really relish the opportunity to learn and experience things every moment, especially in the beginning. So those romantic first few months or so, that's a really special memory, I think. And perhaps other people who've been in a cross-cultural relationship or still are may have a similar perspective when everything is new and everything is fresh and vibrant.
Okay, let's talk about a specific example of this new world that you found when you first encounter or when you first engage in a cross-cultural relationship. Was there any tradition from your partner, for example, that you embraced?
Okay, so if I talk about this cross-cultural dating or relationships with an Indonesian, I'm going to have to be Bali specific here.
Yeah.
So as we know, Indonesia is such a diverse country,
Yeah.
but this is going to be a Bali specific example.
And we can't generalize.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Bali is very unique, I think. So in those first few weeks, okay, and this was in Bali, not in Australia, but in Bali itself, as somebody who had arrived in Bali with that specific goal in mind. I want to learn and immerse myself in Balinese culture, learn the arts, and I had this dream of becoming an Australian Balinese dancer. So
You finally become a Balinese dancer.
Yeah, that happened later on. But at the beginning, I was very naive, but also very curious. So any invitation, like I think it's a common thing to invite a foreigner to come to your village, come visit my village, come join a ceremony, come and witness this. And I thought by receiving that invitation, it was like entering into a secret world that was like beyond the reach of your typical tourist.
Yeah,
so I felt kind of privileged.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I said yes to going along to a ceremony. It was a funeral in the village that, involved a very long motorbike ride through the mountains and, to the other side of the island. Doesn't look far on a map, but it really does feel quite far when you're on a bike in the tropical heat, etc. But, arriving there, one thing you have to get used to is feeling like an outsider, feeling awkward. You stand out in these situations. So just forget about that and get amongst it. And, so I donned the kabaya and the kain, dressed, appropriately and joined the ceremony. And from that moment, my perspective really changed. It was the first time I'd ever seen a dead body in my life. This is dating in Indonesia.
Very romantic.
But it was it's because death, this is a whole other conversation, but death is, treated differently in Indonesian cultures, including Balinese culture. It's more of a public event when you mourn and farewell someone. So inviting a foreigner, your new foreign girlfriend to join your grandma's funeral is a normal thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Those initial stages were could be considered shocking, but for me it was just one amazing, interesting experience after the other that I embraced. Joining a funeral, bathing in the river, climb a coconut tree.
Climbed a coconut tree.
I felt like, wow, what an achievement.
I couldn't even do it.
It was fun. It has to be the right angle, to start off with. But those initial dizzy weeks were very exciting.
Is it because you probably were you a researcher already by that time?
I was at that stage. I had graduated from my undergraduate, and
I mean, this is the dream of ethnographers, right? You lived with the people that you are studying, basically learned something, and you've been doing all of those with your partner at the time. So now it sounds really beautiful experience, positive, and this is something that has been dreamt by people like you, people who like to learn different things, different culture, different language, and it's not easy to get into that specific world where you have to get through this particular channel, like a personal relationship, and you've done that. But to speak about it honestly, I mean, there must be the downside of it. Were there any significant challenges in a cross-cultural relationship? What do you think? What's your perspective on that? Your experience?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing we can be very interested and curious about learning about our partner and their culture, but we have to be careful not to treat them like, a research subject.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So
you're taking notes the whole time, like,
yeah. I mean, I absorbed what I learned around me, and I had to, treat this person with respect as a human being and somebody that I loved, So there's that aspect. You don't want to cross the line and get to objectify that person as some kind of exotic creature.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then there are some things that, this is where my critical thinking feminism comes out.
Yeah.
So we have gender. So for me as an Australian who grew up in a different kind of gender order to an Indonesian or to a Balinese woman, some of the gendered aspects of life and the relationship became more acutely felt as time went on. So past those initial heady stages of romance, we started to, deal with the reality of life and the reality that, in Bali, the man is seen as the head of the family and women are, subordinate. Their interests are subordinate to, the man's and really distinct gender roles. And these roles are really reinforced by tradition as well. And I think you might find these gendered aspects of dating, they'll be pronounced in other cultural contexts in Indonesia, but they'll have their own, contextual variability depending on the circumstances. So in Bali, it's really intertwined with their religious traditions. And so what I initially saw as a thing of beauty, and this beautiful spectacle of offerings, intricate carvings, etc. But it's also intertwined with this really hierarchical, gendered system of, of family structures and relationships. Yeah.
Right. So what kind of expectations from your partner's family or friends of you in that context? Well,
I think from what I've witnessed in terms of cross-cultural dating in this specifically Balinese context, when a foreign woman marries a Balinese man, they are really celebrated if they embrace the Balinese traditions. So in terms of, making the daily offerings, crafting these and making the offerings, attending the almost weekly village or banja rituals at the local temple, at the various temples. It's a complex network of temples. So fulfilling those responsibilities is something that's really celebrated. But for me, as time went on, I began to question, do I really want to commit myself to this relationship and all these things that it entails, dating or being married to a Balinese man? Because I think, speaking more broadly about Indonesia, there is that sense that people in relationships should get married as a rite of passage into adulthood. Before you get married and have children, you yourself are kind of considered a child. So there is that kind of social pressure to go through with marriage. And I would be asked by, the family members, Jane, are you going to become a Balinese person? Jane mau jadi orang Bali. And
that implies do you want to go to another level?
Yes, take it to the next level. And I've seen relationships where the women embrace that and they're revered as really wonderful examples of adaptation and respect for the Balinese culture. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to make that step, that formal step into the Balinese world, or whether I would just hang at the outskirts as a kind of observer. Because as an observer, you don't have all those extra responsibilities to, uphold. Yeah, so that was one thing. And the other challenging aspect is something that relates to global inequality, really. It's kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to these cross-cultural relationships, because Indonesia and Australia are viewed differently in the world. There is this economic disparity between Indonesia and Australia. Of course, there are wealthy, well-to-do people in Indonesia, but in general, and especially if your relationship is with somebody from a working class or village background, then there is this expectation on the foreign partner that somehow they're going to become a fountain of wealth for the family and a
ATM, a money machine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always explicit, but sometimes it is. So, for example, you'll be asked, do you want to buy some land? Do you want to buy my brother a car? Or do you want to help build an extension on the house? Because everyone in Bali seems to dream of having a two-story house.
Right, that's right.
Build the next floor on my house. Or some money for my family's healthcare, or renovating the shrine as well.
Wow. That would be very expensive.
Yeah, but that's a very important thing for Balinese people, to have the family shrine in good order. And when you drive or ride your motorbike past the house, the tops of the shrines are visible, and it's a real indicator of their socioeconomic status.
That's right.
It's funny how it's all intertwined, religion and your economic status, but there's this sense of, pride that my shrine looks good to the outside world.
Right.
Yeah. So these are examples of, the wish list for Balinese, and some of these wish list items are mentioned in the relationships with the partner. And to be honest, I don't object to sharing some of this wealth, breaking down some of this global economic inequality. That's good. But at the same time, it creates this strange, unequal partnership where one person is kind of sponsoring the other person, and I don't feel comfortable with that position of power. And then we've got those gender dynamics as well, where the man is supposed to be in the position of power according to tradition and culture, but at the same time, the partner is wealthier or seen as wealthier. So that's a very complex thing to navigate.
That's right. So in a way, it's like creating a structure of dependence in a relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because your partner and partner's family would maintain this expectation of you to keep contributing materially, which to some extent you don't mind, but if it keeps going for a longer term, there might be like another question, because, who would know? Economic crisis, inflation.
So, and you don't want that to be the foundation on which this relationship is built. The fact that, this foreigner is, supporting the family financially. There's more to it than that. Much more.
Still about that, does it apply to specific gender, that kind of material expectation? Like, is it only to a woman or to a man from the West? Especially.
I think in terms of money, this might be a sad reality in Indonesia, but money really talks in Indonesia. Money can overcome a lot of disparities. For example, I believe personally that to some extent money trumps race in Indonesia. Money can trump gender in Indonesia. But while it is still possibly the number one factor that gives you power, then there are these undercurrents at the same time which kind of disrupt that power. So, for example, if you're a woman in a position of relative financial power compared to the man, then there'll still be those underlying gendered aspects where the man is expected to be the decision maker, the one in charge, the one calling the shots in the family. So who knows, that may create some tension, conflict in the relationship if the man isn't comfortable, cannot reconcile these two issues.
Okay, let's talk about the next thing that is still relevant to this, is that how do you navigate differences, including different expectations of each other? You could include the material expectations as well if you want, but in a personal level, like how do you navigate differences?
There are so many ways, but I think initially you might assume that Indonesians are reticent, they may not be forthcoming about their feelings or their opinions, but as you get to know someone over time, these barriers break down and you can have an honest and open communication with your partner where, you know, if some aspects are troubling you, you can be honest with them. And I think...
Would that happen though?
In an ideal world, it's good to have this honest and open conversation. However, if you are too honest, too brutally honest, and you touch on a sensitive topic like money, wealth...
Or religion maybe?
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Yeah.
How did I forget? But I think both sides have to recognise that when you're coming into this relationship, you're going to have different expectations, different perspectives. So finding some common ground and a shared desire to move forward together and work through these issues. But if there's sometimes when conflict arises in the relationship, people become increasingly stubborn and polarised, and it's really hard to move on. And that's when these differences really become stronger and more acute. There also needs to be a willingness on the behalf of the foreigner to actively learn about the culture. And that includes, unfortunately, you're going to have to learn the language, I believe.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to create this equality between the partners. So, yeah, and being able to switch between languages where you feel comfortable is a great way, I believe, of creating this equal sense in the relationship. So language isn't the key to solving all your problems, but it's a really important gesture, I believe. Yeah.
And it would improve your understanding of your partners, you know?
Yes.
Probably.
And I think if, for example, as a foreigner living in Indonesia, in a relationship with an Indonesian person, being able to speak their language and, even better, their local language, the foreign person will be more attuned to the discourse that's going on around them, like in the local community. And if you can speak Indonesian, you'll be able to understand, what are the hot topics on the news, in politics, in sinetron, whatever, at the moment. So then you can have you're participating in the same world together.
That's right. A question about language still. Did your language skill improve when you're in that relationship?
Oh, yes. I think being in a relationship is if you really have the motivation, it's a great place to improve your language proficiency.
Yeah.
Maybe the relationship won't last.
Yeah.
Who knows? It may. But at least you will come away with language proficiency at the end,
right.
improved language, if you actually make the effort. And especially when you're in a relationship with someone long term. You know each other. You can be honest. You can accept their mistakes or provide really open and honest correction without any consequences, really. So that's a great way. And you can converse. And another thing is that when you're conversing with the person, it's going to be on everyday issues. So your vocabulary for the mundane, which is like an everyday part of life, is going to improve. You're going to have this excellent toolkit that you can use. Like you'll learn words like, you know, the word for a pipe or a tap or pump, you know, the things that you encounter in everyday life that you probably won't really think about learning unless you're living in this situation.
That will help you to be more articulate what you're trying to say, right?
And more independent as well, because that's one thing. Like we talked about dependency before, we don't want to, well, we might see the foreign person as this source of, you know, wealth for the family. At the same time, foreigners tend to over-rely, so this is my opinion, okay? I believe that foreigners may tend to over-rely on their Indonesian spouse in country to navigate Indonesian things. Like at first that makes sense, but over time, as you become more knowledgeable about the country, more capable of speaking the language, it's time to step out and try and solve some of those problems yourself.
That's true.
I dare you. Try and apply your language skills at the kantor polisi, you know?
Yeah, that's right. How to make SIM driver license.
See if you can do it yourself without relying on your Indonesian partner to sort out all those Indonesia-specific issues. There
you go. All right, one last question. Is there any advice from you that you could give to couples who are currently in cross-cultural relationships? Like, what would, you know, improve in their relationship? It sounds like a different topic here. It's like about love, relationship kind of topic, but not really. I mean, like, this is still related to the main topic.
I'm not going to give any tips on that kind of stuff, but I'm not a counsellor either. But as someone who, okay, let's say from a critical feminist perspective. First and foremost, think about why you're in this relationship with the person, okay? What is the reason for dating this person? Is it just a relationship of convenience, or is it because you find that person exotic? And that goes both ways, you know. Or is it because you actually love the person, you know, for who they are, okay? Regardless of all those extra exciting cultural bits, you know, like sometimes when you see your partner, like Indonesian partner, dressed up in their traditional culture attire, it's like, oh, wow, they look so cool. But moving beyond that, beyond the, you know, the batik and the, who are they as a person, okay? Do you feel comfortable with that person? Do you feel loved in return? How
about compatibility?
Yeah, that's it. So are you compatible? Are you truly compatible? Or is this just motivated because of, you know, you're attracted to them because they're different and exciting and interesting? We don't want to objectify people as, you know, and turn them into something bigger than what they are. They are a human being, okay, and not a whole big culture. You know what I mean? And I think the other piece of advice is, this is for the long term. When you're in it for the long haul, you know, you move past those initial romantic days when you're riding around on a motorbike, falling in love. Those are good memories. But then when you move into the mundane stuff, okay, you've got to be able to work together as a team to get through this, to navigate, you know, washing the dishes, whose turn is it to clean the bathroom, all these boring things that you have to be able to embrace as well as part of life with your partner. And I guess as well, as an Australian, I'm, born and raised in Australia, it's hard for me to really register the importance of religion as a kind of secular-minded person. But that's my final tip, I think, for dating an Indonesian. Don't underestimate the importance of religion to who they are. So, don't expect them to change.
People who come from different cultures, thinking about different aspects, really important. Like when you said that, some people just like dating someone because they're different. They look different, culturally different. But it could be an interesting aspect to, a reason to the relationship, but it could be dangerous in a way because it's an abstract idea, different. Like, could be different religion, different culture, different language, different habit, different personality. Could be something positive that would change you, change your personality positively, develop, grow together. But it could be the other way around, and then it could probably bring you to a different kind of world, which could be darker.
I think, we have to be really sure of our motivations for liking somebody, not just in the beginning, but over time. And I think when you start to notice these differences and maybe you don't like the way somebody does something, forcing someone to change, in my experience, and this is not just for Indonesians and Australians, but forcing someone to change their ways in a relationship usually results in resistance.
That's right.
Yeah. So somehow, I don't have the magical key, but somehow navigating these differences rather than forcing sameness and what can we say, forcing people to think and feel and act the same, that's not going to get you anywhere.
That's right.
So going back to those early days, remember, you liked this person, you knew that they were different to you. Keep that in mind. They're still that person. They're not going to suddenly change overnight and adapt to your world and to your worldview. So, and when it comes to Indonesians, I think sometimes being too blunt, too critical about certain sensitive topics, class, religion, race, etc., can really stir up more tensions than is necessary. So
isn't it ironic? I mean, this is beyond cross-cultural relationship. I mean, this is in any relationship that when you like someone, when you dated someone, you actually like the person of who they are. But then once in a more serious relationship, getting into marriage, and then why all of a sudden you expect the person to be someone that they're not. Anyway, all right. Thanks for sharing, Jane. It's such a fascinating conversation about cross-cultural relationship. And thank you to everyone for watching us in this episode. If you're interested in studying Indonesian, the language, the culture, and the society, you can find more about us in the links below. Thank you, and see you again next time.